Welcome to another episode of the Mom Founders Table. We are kicking off another series today, and we are taking it personal. I'm bringing you behind the scenes. So starting today and over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to give you the real tea of what has happened in my life behind the scenes. And we're focusing this on 3 different areas. So today I'm talking all about what I've actually done to go from being arrested 3 times to now being a multimillionaire. I'm going to talk about next week what I have done and how I've managed my family and my relationships as I have grown and changed. And then we are going to end with how I actually make it all fit and what I do behind the scenes to actually have work-life balance, even as I have grown my family and grown these businesses. So kicking it off today, we are starting with my story. And I think that it's really interesting whenever I share pieces or parts of my story, people are like, whoa, wait a second. Hold up. What did you just say? So if you are not familiar with my story, or if you are familiar with the story, let me go back before we go forward. Because to really give you the story of how I got to where I am now, it's important that I talk about where I came from, because who I am was built in a lot of my struggles. So let's go back. 1987, I was born in Texas, and I love Texas. Even though at this point I have lived in Florida for longer than I lived in Texas, it still feels like home to me. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it will ever go away, but I love Texas. I do not remember my parents actually being together. They were married, but they divorced when I was 2 years old. And so as a child, I grew up going from home to home. My parents married and remarried a few times. And so that put me in different households. I saw some different relationships. Really, what it came down to is, as a child, what I experienced was a lack of stability or structure. And what that turned into for me was trying to figure out where I fit and trying to figure out my place of belonging. And I think that one of the things that is most accepting in our society is the bar scene and the party scene, being that alcohol especially can really just make us take off any mask, can help us feel more courage. And so that was an easy place for me to fall into because everyone there was accepting. Right? It's very rare that you meet a group of drunk people or people that have at least been buzzed that are not just like, hey, how are you? What's going on? And so it was really in that place of okay, I'm not sure where I fit as I changed schools a lot, as I moved around a lot. But when I was about 14, I started to find these different social circles. And within those social circles, there was the normal childhood experimentation. And I think there is a very fine line between what normal experimentation looks like, be that with, intimacy or drugs or alcohol. And then there's the line of it going past that line, right? Of really moving into it being self-destructive behaviors. Unfortunately, because I wanted to belong so badly, and because what I would later learn was me having a need to numb the pain that I was feeling, that very quickly and easily became my lifestyle. And so from the age of about 14 until 23, I primarily spent my days in the party scene. And when I say party scene, I mean, again, just a lot of sexual activity, a lot of drinking, and a lot of experimentation with drugs as well. To me, it was like I finally was getting the attention that I always wanted. And I finally was in a place where I felt like I belonged. And so I think that was why it was so easy for me, no matter how many times I woke up in a place where I didn't know where I was, or no matter how many times I recognized that I wanted to feel differently or do differently throughout this almost 10-year period, I quickly fell back into it. And that in itself is just such a peek into why I do things the way that I do with my clients, because had I not addressed what was underlying, had I not been honest and taken accountability for myself, my choices, and that I wanted to create something differently, and had I not had the resilience to push through the discomfort of change, I would not be where I am. So that was how I spent, from the age of 14 to 23. So within that time period, I again moved around a lot. I was arrested a total of 3 times. And so those 3 arrests are so interesting because everybody has a rock bottom moment. And for most people, it's not going to jail, luckily, but we all have them, right? Whether that's just like you feeling like you're losing your marriage, whether that's feeling like your kids are resentful, whether that's you being so burnt out emotionally that it starts to manifest physically and that puts you in the hospital, or you keep getting sick, or you have some sort of illness that develops. I've seen all of these things in my clients. And so that rock bottom moment for me didn't come until the 3rd arrest. The first wasn't enough, the second wasn't enough, and the 3rd was finally it. And I think it was the severity of the 3rd arrest. The 3rd arrest was actually my 2nd DUI, and I also had a felony drug charge because I had drugs in my wallet. And, it's interesting because when we're in these dark seasons and we have these things that happen to us or feel like they're happening to us, it's very easy for us to go into a victim mentality, to sink into, why is this happening to me? Why am I here? Why do I keep ending up here? And the most powerful moment that I've ever experienced in my life that changed the trajectory of my life was when I was in that jail cell, which for my 3rd arrest, I had told them that I was going to take my life. And so they put me in the medical unit. The medical unit inside a jail is a larger room that has more people in it. And in this room, it was, now looking back, the perfect sequence of events because I woke up and of course I was groggy. My contacts were fuzzy because I had been crying, and these women are talking amongst themselves and just talking about what they're there for. And I remember 2 conversations pretty vividly, and both of those women were in there for murder. And it was that moment where I was like, whoa, like you have put yourself in a position to be in the same room with women who have taken somebody's life. And it was like this huge moment of awakening of hearing those conversations. And then because my contacts were so fuzzy, going the sink and the jailhouse mirror, which they are rusted and nothing is like well taken care of there, obviously. And looking up at myself, and it was like I saw myself for the very first time. And that was the moment that now I recognize that I took my power back, even literally being in jail, because I realized that I was the one that kept putting myself there. And as silly and as simple as that sounds, like we all put ourselves in these circumstances, in these situations, and then we're like, why am I here? And it's not until we're like, I'm here because I put myself here, that we get out of it. And so it's very symbolic now that there was a mirror there, right? Had there not been a mirror, would the conversation that I was having in my head been as impactful? I don't know. I'm grateful that it was there. And so I speak about this moment so often because, once again, this is why personal accountability and taking responsibility for where you are is the best thing that you can do. It is truly life-changing. Be that in a situation in your business where it just doesn't feel good anymore, in your marriage, any of it, if you can look at the situation and say, holy shit, I have put myself in this room. Oh my gosh, I have put myself in this situation, then you can change it. It is only then that you can actually change. And so this was the first time that I took accountability. This was the first time that after exiting that situation, that room, I didn't run to numbing and coping. And we all have these certain coping skills or lack thereof that we run to. And for a lot of my clients, it's work. It's the busyness and the distraction because it makes us feel like we're productive, and it's avoidance from us looking at the things that are hard that we really need to be looking at. And so that was my pivotal moment. That was the moment that changed everything. That was the moment that I took that accountability. And then from there, I started to ask for help. I started to realize I have to remove the things that are not serving me. What was not serving me in that time was drugs, alcohol, and a lot of the friendships that I had, which was interesting because they naturally fell off as I had continued to grow. And I'm going to speak more about that in the relationship part of this series. But that truly was an incredible turn of events for me, which is why I'm so grateful, like every day that I wake up. I'm so grateful for that perspective that I have. So really the shift that I had in my mind that allowed me to stop spiraling and numbing was recognizing that I could change it. And that led to me starting to seek solutions that would allow me to change it. And so it was removing drugs, it was removing alcohol. And funny enough, I was actually still in an environment where I was bartending. I bartended sober for an entire year. And that was really the last thing that I removed. I knew at this time, Eric and I had met. We were like in the early stages of dating. And I knew that was kind of the last thing that needed to go. I was not drinking. I was not in the party scene anymore. I had started working out. I was working out consistently. And so I was doing all of these things. I was working with a life coach. And so I was doing all of these things to grow, right? To face my demons, if you will. And so it was just this one environmental piece that was still tugging at me to where it's like, well, this is, how I make money. This is how I provide for myself. This is how I pay for my house, like all of these things. And I knew I needed to let it go, and I didn't know how. And I knew that like the next thing that was calling me was actually the development of us as people, which at that time was in the fitness category. And so I quit bartending. I got my personal training certification and I started working at this big box gym. And it was really interesting because in my year of bartending sober, I realized like how much money I was making and how much I had never saved my money. And when we're talking about like building like what I have built, I personally think that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they spend everything that they make. And while there are usually two extremes of people that like repel money because they, may bring in tons of money, but then they're spending it all. And there's people that are hoarders that save it all. I definitely fell on the hoarding side, which I think, if anything, worked for my advantage when it came to building my net worth and what we have now. But I really saw like how much money I was spending and how I had no long-term goals when it came to financial success. I was just living day to day. And so when I removed everything, I started thinking with this long-term view of like, oh man, I get to rebuild my life. And so I started saving more money. And then I quit bartending. I got my personal training certification. I started working at a gym, and it was only about 3 months into working at the gym that, because I was in this intense growth phase of like seeing what was possible for my life, it ran into every single area of my life. And so what I started doing is I started thinking bigger, right? I started thinking about, okay, I'm working for this gym. They are charging people $50 per session to pay me $7 of that $50, right? And I was like, this doesn't feel like a good percentage for somebody that's doing all of the work. And so I decided that I was going to go out on my own. I didn't like make a decision of like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It was like, this is not serving me. And so I believe that I could build something on my own, and I'm going to go try. And so that turned into many years of me working with people in their physical element while also taking a behind the scenes look at the mental element. And this is an important part of the story because I not only changed my relationship with money and my spending habits so I was saving more, I also made that big, bold decision of like, I'm going to charge my worth ask for what I believe I deserve, and I'm going to stick with that. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do that, right? I was deathly afraid. Every time you do a price increase in your business, nobody is ever like, this is so easy. This is a great time. We all hesitate. We all have fear around it. And I just was so committed to building something different and to not wasting another 10 years of my life that I just said, I'm going to do this on my own and I'm going to figure it out. And so I started the fitness business, which was in-person personal training. That then turned into online personal training. And then we also opened a gym local to us. So unlike a lot of people who advise or coach on businesses, I had businesses prior to being a business advisor. And so we had the gym. I had built this really incredible fitness business, and it had built with my only intention truly was just to be there for people, to get them great results and have good customer service, which I still stand in my businesses today. And when I'm working and partnering with clients, those are two of the things that I lead with, right? My customer service is always going to be top priority. Giving somebody a good experience, deeply caring about them as people, always top priority. So I built this fitness business. We had the gym. I was competing in figure. I was competing in powerlifting. And I I don't want to say quickly, but over the course of a few years, grew a decent sized following on social media. And so I had always posted on social media without there was no strategy behind it. It was just me sharing my life, my stories, me being vulnerable and honest about like my growth, my learnings, who I was, what I did, what I was doing, and then sharing my clients and their results. And so that was just building, and people were watching my story and asking questions. And what I realized in the fitness journey of my own and then working with people was how mental it was how when you're training for a powerlifting meet, how belief in yourself would really dictate if you would get the lift or not. Right? I learned about how struggles with being able to be consistent with nutrition or exercise were much more related to things outside of the actual health protocol. And so I started to ask those questions. I started to ask people questions about their minds, their stress, their anxiety, their sleep, their relationships. And that was where my heart was like, okay, there's something here. And that was when I started to make the initial pivot into more life coaching, into more personal development, into really getting people a transformation that was deeper and bigger than their bodies. And this experience is what taught me what is still the foundation of my business now, which is like, we can't have external change without internal change. Which is why when I'm working with somebody on strategy for their business, whether that is to grow, to change, anything operational, we always address, hey, well, if you want to make that change, how do you need to communicate it? What fears do you need to overcome? How are you going to lead your business in a different way so that you have less team turnover? How are you going to lead your business in a different way so that you can work less? And so the holistic view just became a part of who I am and how I work. And that flowed into everything that I've created today. So I built this big fitness business and I started building this online following. So I had in-person clients, I had virtual clients, we had the gym. And then I felt this calling towards rerouting a bit to focus more on a deeper level of transformation. And then I realized that so many women were stuck, right? So many women were stuck and they were handcuffed to different things. And I realized how much freedom entrepreneurship had gave me. And this was the same timing that I became a mom, right? And so being able to run businesses while also being a mom, and knowing that I felt like I didn't get very present parents and I wanted to be there for my child, I became so focused on how do I create some sort of work-life balance so that I can still provide this incredible client experience while also showing up for my kid, right? And so since then, obviously, I've added 2 more kids to our family. But the business advisory and the strategic planning and the entrepreneurship was a natural evolution that came because so many women saw this transformation that I had had, that my clients were having, who they were becoming. And they're like, wait, I want to run my business where I also have work-life balance. I want to have an identity outside of my business. I want to have hobbies. I want to have a marriage that is deep and rich. Like, how do I do that? And so it was really me starting to teach people about how I was doing it. And the more that I learned and the more that I grew and the more that I invested in my own education and the zillions of books that I read, the more that I have been able to lead and guide people who are making anywhere from multi six figures to all the way up to 8 figures, right? To where it's really just this desire for women to get their lives back. Right. And I had to learn how to get my life back first. And while it wasn't necessarily my business that had taken my life, it was my personal choices in that 10 years that had handcuffed me to falling into the same cycles and the same patterns. So before I could experience any of the business success that I've built, before I could make a lot of money, take care of my family, do anything that I've done, I had to look internally. And that was where everything was built from. And so again, along the way, I had to learn how to manage my money. I had to ask for a lot of help. I had to get mentors. I had to get guidance. I had to build a team for my business. And so these are all steps that had to happen in my trajectory to get where I am. But none of it would have happened if I had not focused on my own personal transformation. If I had not taken a year solid of head down, focused on what do you want for your life? How do you want to feel? Why do you keep going back to these patterns? Where are you going next? And answering those questions. I created a new life because I knew that the one that I was living was no longer serving me. I knew that I could not keep making the same decisions that I was making and continue forward. And for many people, that's where they get stuck. And especially when it comes to your business, because your business is the thing that provides for your family. The business is the thing that you've built that's successful externally, that is providing a lifestyle that you may not even be enjoying. But at the end of the day, if you can have the belief that you can build something different, and if you can have the discipline to be committed to building something different and doing success in a different way, then it can happen. Some of the key decisions that have helped me build what I have today are, first and foremost, an unwillingness to ever quit. I can quit businesses, I can quit hobbies, I can quit many things, but I will never quit on myself. And that is the difference. People are like, well, I can't just quit doing this. And I'm like, no, you don't have to quit doing the thing that's providing for your family, but you do need to do it differently. You need to quit saying yes to things that you want to say no to, right? So it was an unwillingness to ever quit on myself or to accept anything less than what I actually wanted. Because there's this knowingness that we have that there is something better. There is a knowingness that we have that we could be happier, more joyful, more present, more peaceful, stop feeling so reactive all the time. But we have to be committed to making the change to make it happen. Other decisions that I made that were key factors in my success were aligning myself with people who also had growth mentality. And I'm going to speak more about this in the relationships part of this series, but who you surround yourself with and putting yourself with people who will lift you up, who see the potential and possibility in you before you see it. When I started out on this journey, I knew that I could create something different. I knew that I wanted better for myself, but I wasn't exactly sure what it looked like. And even knowing that I could do something differently, was still on wobbly feet. And so I think when you surround yourself with people and you're open and you communicate and you share your dreams and you share your struggles, you allow people to kind of become that support system for you. And so putting myself in a relationship and in a marriage where we think alike, even though we're different in so many ways, where neither of us will ever let ourselves quit on ourselves. And so I think that's another key decision that I made is I chose accountability. I chose to not only say that I wanted to create something different and do things differently, but I chose to hire help that could hold me accountable. A CFO, a financial advisor for the money, business mentors to show me the way, right? Help for my children, help for my marriage, therapy, life coaching, all of the things, accountability. And I think that on my way to building the success that I've had, I have learned so many lessons. I have learned that you cannot give up on yourself. I have learned that you need to ask for help sooner than you think. I have learned that it doesn't have to feel really bad before you ask for help. I have learned that if something feels misaligned, it probably is, and that I don't have to choose to do things the way that other people have, especially when it doesn't align with my values. Any of my biggest mistakes that I've made in my business or in my life is when I actively went against my own intuition or my own values in the pursuit of what I thought would get me to a goal. There are so many different ways to reach the same goals. I've also learned that one of the things that throws us off the most and is the most destructive is urgency and believing that faster is always better. I do believe that the most successful people are able to make quick decisions. I believe they're great decision makers. This is why I teach a decision-making process. But I also believe that there's a difference in being able to make decisions that you stand proudly in and making decisions based in fear, especially fear of missing out. And so I also think that one of the most important things that I carry with me every day is a reminder that when I look back on my days, I don't want to regret. I don't want to regret trying things because I was too afraid. I don't want to regret not investing time, energy, money into the things that I felt were important. I don't want to regret all of my time being spent working and not with my family. I don't want to be filled with regret. I want to look back on my days and know that I made a mark on the world, know that I truly impacted people, know that my impact will outlast me through my children and through the children of the women that I work with. And I want to know that I showed up for my family and that my family now shows up for themselves because they saw me showing up for me. We have to learn to trust ourselves. We have to learn to believe in our potential. And we have to learn to ask for accountability when we're wading through something that feels really scary. I went from being arrested 3 times to being a multimillionaire because I didn't try to do it alone. I'm here only because of all of the people who helped me. And as much as people will say that self-made is this badge of honor, nobody is self-made. Somebody made you. You came out of somebody. That's the truth. You're alive because somebody gave you life. And along the way, somebody has given you a helping hand. And along my path, I've received so many helping hands. And I've received those helping hands because I was unafraid to ask for them. I didn't let my ego or my desire to be seen as independent or resilient stop me from saying, I want to go there, and who do I need to help me? I hope this has given you some insights today into how I went from that rock bottom to being where I am, both tactically and mostly in changing how I operated as a person. And I want you to know that if you feel stuck, if you feel like you have lost your identity and your life to your business, that it can be different, and that powerful decisions and honest accountability and personal responsibility will change the trajectory of everything. And if you're somebody who's sitting in that choice and you recognize it's time to make a different choice. If you're somebody who has built the external and you're missing the internal, if you're somebody who is disconnected in your marriage, struggling with your relationships with your kids, and you don't really know who you are anymore, if you're unable to show up for yourself because you're always showing up for everybody else, then we should probably have a conversation. We will link the application in the show notes today, and I am happy to answer any questions. If there is clarity on my path that I can provide to you that would help you, I'm always happy to answer those questions. My DMs are open, my email is open to you. And I hope that you guys truly enjoy this series. I hope this inspires you more than anything to let you know that at any moment in time, you can make a change that will powerfully shift everything for the better. I'll see you guys next week.